China is set to host an informal meeting of defense ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Now, the summit comes amid rising territorial tensions in the South China Sea. Beijing has also denounced Washington's intentions to conduct a so-called freedom of navigation exercise close to some disputed islands. Now, China claims the 12 nautical miles around the Spratly Islands as within its borders. Its claims overlap with a number of other countries in the South China Sea. Step Fasten reports.
Two world powers flexing their muscles over 7 small islands in the South China Sea. Recent satellite photos show building on coral reefs reclaimed by China. The construction includes what the U.S. suspects will be the latest of 3 airfields on reefs, which the U.S. says are in international waters. U.S. plans for a military exercise in the disputed area is adding to existing tension.
Of course, it will add, to the already existing tensions, in the area. And of course, a lot of Southeast Asian countries are looking at this very carefully. And then we hope that, it will not actually, create a new spiral of tension.
China denies it is militarizing the reefs, which are near disputed islands also claimed by Taiwan, Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia and the Philippines. China accuses the U.S. of flexing its military muscles. U.S. armed forces have recently increased their presence in the Asia-Pacific region and intensified Navy exercises like this one off the coast of Indonesia.
The U.S. Navy is committed to helping provide security to Southeast Asia, the waters surrounding these countries. I think it's part of America's rebalance to the Asia-Pacific, the Indo-Asia Pacific. So it's not just the United States Navy, it's the countries in the region. They have a shared and mutual interest in maintaining stability.
During the exercise, 600 U.S. Marines and sailors took part in several large amphibious beach assaults. The United States showing their presence here in Southeast Asia, with tensions rising in the South China Sea. Exercises like these are also seen as a show of force in one of the world's most crucial waters. Many around the region hope the two superpowers will be able to control themselves.
Such kind of event is not immediately so dangerous. And this means that even this kind of thing happen, and China and the United States still will control each other's airplanes and warships to avoid the military clash. But of course, and anyway, this kind of situation and keep the potential of danger and a military clash.
Southeast Asian nations hope to speed up negotiations about a so-called Code of Conduct. It aims to regulate freedom of navigation at sea and overflying rights to contribute to peace in the South China Sea. But it may be too late, with U.S. plans to test the waters and carry out its freedom of navigation exercise very soon. Step Fasten, Al Jazeera, Jakarta.
We're joined now by Ashley Townshend, who's a research fellow at the United States Studies Center at the University of Sydney. Thanks very much for being with us. I'd like to know what you make of this meeting that's about to happen in Beijing, where China is hosting an informal meeting with the ASEAN defense ministers. Is this Beijing's diplomatic move to alleviate tension in the region, or is this China's way of reiterating its territorial rights?
Look, I think it's important to have reasonably low expectations about the outcome of this particular meeting. It is in some ways an effort by Beijing to both improve its relations with ASEAN, but also not to budge on some of the issues that are most important to Beijing and that are sticking points between China and the ASEAN nations. In particular, the ASEAN nations, as was just pointed out in the report, want to see a code of conduct built for the South China Sea that would regulate the maritime interactions and air interactions between the navies and coast guards of the region and set rules for engagement, essentially. China has stalled on this agreement over many years and is unlikely to budge on this particular point. Earlier this year, there was a decision between China and ASEAN to move forward on discussing more complex complex issues. There was also a decision to move forward on fast-tracking some sort of crisis management hotline between the two sides. I think it's very unlikely we're going to see any concrete outcomes on either of those 2 points in this meeting. I think rather it's going to achieve a sort of a vague objective of improving high-level communication between the two sides without any concrete outcome.
Mr. Townshend, with so much tension in the region, though, and given China's international standing on the world stage, wouldn't it work against Beijing to flex its military might in the disputed region?
Beijing has been increasing its presence in the South China Sea now for the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years, they have significantly increased their strategic presence on disputed islands in the Spratly Islands archipelago, as well as in the Paracel Islands and more broadly. They've undertaken a number of military exercises in the South China Sea, 3 at least in the last 12 months, including one that had over 100 warships. So they've clearly been flexing their muscles in the region, and China does see the South China Sea, or at least the large parts of it, as being Chinese territory historically. Now, reconciling those historical rights that China is vowed, that Beijing has vowed to defend, and that is important politically at home, reconciling that with stable relations with its neighbours is a very, very difficult balancing act, and certainly one that China is not willing to compromise on at this stage.
Certainly a very fine line that Beijing has to walk. Ashley Townshend, thank you. Ashley Townshend, their research fellow at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney.
Thank you.
Now, the